There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn, Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and another issue of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to discuss bookish literary issues bouncing off some kind of article online. And here, for her umpteenth appearance on my channel, but I believe it's her first appearance in this series, is the preeminent literary translator from French to English, and my friend Tina Kover joining us from the UK. Hello, Tina.
Hello, it's always such a pleasure to be here.
Any excuse will do, but we're here to
Mhm.
discuss a great article. But before that, a couple other points about Tina's translations, and we're going to get into some more detail a little later in the chat. But she is probably most well known, but that's debatable, for Disoriental by Négar Djavadi, and the other one would be The Postcard by Berest. There's also a forthcoming one that I'm dying to hear more about, and that'll be a little later in the chat, called Symphony of Monsters by Marc Levy, coming out in January of next year.
That's right.
Great. So I happened upon this article, and I didn't read it before I asked Tina to talk about it, and now we both read it, and it's absolutely fascinating and brilliantly written. So I don't always urge my viewers to go and read the article. I don't think you need to read it first, but you need to read it. It's one of the best written articles I have featured on this series. It's called The Future Will Be Translated, A Manifesto in 3 Lies by Chloe Garcia Roberts. Holy smokes, does it pack a wallop. Tina, what did you make of this?
It's absolutely stunning. And I've never met Chloe or heard of Chloe, but she is my new heroine because it's not only a beautifully written article, just poetically beautifully written. Every sentence just hits you right in the gut. But I wish that I could get everybody I know to read it, and especially anybody who's a translator, because every sentence just resonated with me. Everything she said was something I've worried about or thought about or considered doing. They're all thoughts I've had, and I have a feeling they're pretty universal among us as literary translators. So, yeah, absolutely. It's just all the things that I think we've all been yearning to say and put into words, and she has done it absolutely beautifully.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And she starts out fascinatingly talking about a part-time job or whatever she had when she was like a university student, working in this dormitory for rich men only. And she was hired to fold the sheets and do the house cleaning or whatever, those kinds of jobs. But the strict rule was that the employees who did that work, and she was one of them, were not to be seen by I was going to say the inmates, that's not right, by the students who lived there. So privacy, and for whatever reason, they were to be out of sight and to be as discreet as possible. And she said that was a great preparation for my future life as a translator.
Yeah. And it's definitely, again, I think something we can all identify with. Invisibility is a word that gets applied to translation on various levels, not only in a positive way, but a negative way. The positive part is that when somebody says your translation is invisible, that's certainly a compliment. That is indeed, what you want. You do not want to be reading a book and be distracted by someone's obvious labor over a phrase or a sentence, because when that happens, things tend to become a bit clunky in terms of phrasing or just overworked, really. And it can show and it can break the flow of reading a book and it can disturb your immersion in the plot. So for a translation itself to be invisible is a good thing. The word seamless also gets thrown around, and I know a lot of people don't like that word. I don't have any strong emotions one way or another, but I certainly consider it a major compliment if somebody says my translation is invisible. What that doesn't mean, though, is that we as translators want to be invisible, because what we do, and Chloe talks about this beautifully, is far more than a mechanical process. It's a craft, it's an art, it's deeply personal, and I think it can really be high art. If you read the beautiful translations of Frank Wynne or Daniel Hahn or Jennifer Croft,
Tina Kover.
Uh, Thank you. But yeah, when you read a beautiful turn of phrase, that is coming from a literary soul. A good translator absolutely has the heart of a writer. And of course, there are many translators that do both. Quentin Bates, Jen Calleja, and Jennifer Croft too, and others. What we do is far too often dismissed as being not worthy of recognition or attention. And so there has been that fight against invisibility. Absolutely.
Putting the translators' names on the cover.
Yeah.
Have your
Yeah.
more recent translations, do they have your name on the cover?
So it depends. Some of them do. Some of them, my name is on the back cover, or maybe on the paperback edition rather than the hardback edition. That's in a couple of cases I can think of. It's obviously you're always credited inside the book on the title page, and I won't pretend that for me it's a deal breaker of an issue. I certainly understand why there are translators who feel very strongly about it. And it definitely is a big thrill when I do see my name on the cover.
Now, a lot of the issues, I would say the majority of the issues that she talks about in this article have been issues for translators or about a literary translation for a while now. But now, the present moment is where the threat is from AI. And so
Yeah.
that is the occasion. And so there's a lot in here about AI. Is there anything that you want to say before we get into the three lies about
Mhm.
your perspective on AI being used for literary translation? How much of a threat do you see that as? Because I think it's silly to even worry about it because the translations would be so bad that discerning readers wouldn't want to read something translated by AI. But I want to hear what you think. Never mind what I think.
It's a tricky question because there are times when I've been quite worried about it, and other times when I've had the opinion that it may not be a huge threat at the moment, but I also know how quickly these technologies evolve. And in 3 years, who knows? So sometimes I worry about that as well. And it's, are my days numbered as a literary translator? Is my career have an expiration date? It really depends on the day when you ask me. But I will say that regardless of how far the technology might involve or might evolve, one thing that you will never be able to do really is put again that literary soul and that heart into a machine translation. In this article, Chloe talks beautifully about how literary translation is filtered through our personal experience and the essence of who we are. And every literary translator will give you a different rendition of a passage or a book, which if you ever have the opportunity, or anybody watching, if you ever have the opportunity to attend a translation slam, those are so much fun.
Oh my
And they
God.
really show you how incredibly different two translators can interpret a passage or a page or a few pages of a book. It's phenomenal, absolutely incredible. And anybody who sees that in action is never going to doubt that it's just a simple A to B process. That's something that can't be replaced. And so on my more optimistic days, I am not so worried. I have hope, let's say, as Chloe does.
Two questions about the translation slam. So is there, can we see if we put that into YouTube, or are we going to bring some up? Can we watch them?
Oh, you absolutely might do. They often have them at literary festivals, and it wouldn't be a surprise to me if some of those have been filmed. We have a beautiful little bookstore here in Durham, where I am in the UK, and they have hosted translation slams on a couple of occasions. I think they're becoming more of a fun event at book festivals and book fairs. But yeah, I think give it a Google search.
Absolutely.
It is, they are great fun, and I've never participated in one, but I would love to. Be so much
Well,
fun.
maybe a long-term goal would be for me to host one with you and some of your colleagues online.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be amazing.
Now, the other thing is, would be illustrative of what we're talking about, and we're going to get even deeper into it, is if a translation slam where you had two or three translators and then also ran it through AI and then had a big discussion about that. Wouldn't that be fascinating?
Yes, that would be incredible. Maybe this needs to be Shawn Breed's books, Translators Allowed
Well,
collaboration, and maybe we could get some funding for it and maybe do it in Toronto or London or something.
absolutely. Holy
It
smoke.
would be amazing.
I would like to go through the three lies point by point and get your commentary and whatnot. So I'll read the relevant stuff for those three lies. The first one, we worked for little to no professional recognition, and the rubric for judging our work was whether any trace of ourselves could be detected. And in return for our admission to this clandestine field, translators upheld the illusion, the lie, that the resulting work was not us, our choices, our experience. You've already addressed that. Do you have more to say about that?
I think when it comes to the absence of the translator being a goal or something that we were in the past maybe meant to uphold in exchange for the work or whatever, I can't say that I've ever felt that way. I think I've just been fortunate enough to work with really sensitive and wonderful people in the publishing industry who have been very clear about appreciating what I, as an individual, bring to my translations. And certainly with the abundance of incredible small presses that have come out in the last decade or so, even a bit longer. They too tend to be quite appreciative on a deep sort of literary and intellectual level of what each individual translator brings to the work. So I think the invisibility, I think that the complete invisibility, I should say, I think that maybe belongs to a little bit of an earlier phase in the industry. Yeah, like I said, I'm not sure when Chloe was coming up. Obviously, certainly in any non-literary translation, yes, obviously, it is meant to be as cut and dry as possible, as emotionless and factual and formulaic as possible, which is, I think, what makes non-literary translation quite a bit more, shall we say, vulnerable to
I'm
being
sure.
replaced by AI, sure, because things are written in a boilerplate way, legal contracts and documents and all. And I translated that stuff too. Chloe mentions that's what she started out doing. So did I. I mean, I think a lot of us did. And unless you make your living doing it, you're not necessarily going to bemoan the taking over of that kind of drudgery type of work by AI. So, yeah, invisibility, I think we have fought so hard in recent years and continue to fight for recognition and visibility. And I think if we're threatened with even the small bits of acknowledgement that we get now being taken away, I think we're going to maybe even fight harder to keep our names out there and to be recognized as writers and artists.
Absolutely. And would you agree that your earlier comments about the invisibility in the text, that you were striving for the work of the translator in making their decisions and choices should
Yeah.
be smooth and not interfere with the English reader? Well, I'm getting all tongue-tied,
Yeah.
but that is also part of this lie, right? That it's not just in terms of the identity and how much recognition the translator gets, but it's also when you're reading the translation that you should feel like you're reading Dostoevsky, not Dostoevsky translated by whoever.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think, but in the back of your mind, maybe at a meta level, and maybe after you finish as well, ideally you should think that was beautiful. And that was, even if you don't necessarily think that was a beautiful translation, although you could be like, I want to know who did that work. Although maybe translators are and those few of you with a wonderful taste and discernment who appreciate literary translation, we always look to see who the translator is. But in general, I think you should, if you've appreciated the beauty of a book that happens to be in translation, on some level, there should be an appreciation of not only the labor, but the skill and the creativity that went into producing it. I would like to think that's there for people.
Have you ever translated a work into English that had previously been translated in an older version into English?
Yes, once. I think only the one time.
Okay.
I think it was just the one time. I translated Alexandre Dumas.
I
Uh,
remember you did, yeah.
yes, Georges. The title of the book is Georges. It's an early one of his. It's a proto Count of Monte Cristo, you might say, in some ways. Has some similarities to that book. It's also his only book that addresses the concept of race and racism and mixed race people in the French colonies. And people, just to put in a little plug for it, might be interested in reading it because Dumas himself was mixed race, which maybe not everybody knows, but it's a fascinating book for that reason alone. It's also just a really fun swashbuckling tale. So I translated that in 2008, I think. And the only previous translation was done in, I believe it was 1913. So I went back and I didn't read it cover to cover, but I certainly had a look at it. I didn't want it to affect my own work too much, but I had a look. And not only was the vocabulary kind of archaic, the style was quite archaic and in some cases problematic, although in a book about slaves and on slave ships, you're going to get some problematic language no matter what. The 1913 version had some truly problematic language. But in addition, I felt like the translation itself was very stilted, very academic, if I can use that word. It was done by a man, I couldn't tell you who. I was picturing some ancient, sort of fusty academic translating this as if it were high literature, and it really isn't. Dumas was some of his books, perhaps. But a lot of his stuff was just meant to be kind of exciting, rip-roaring adventure and fun to read and exciting to read. And this book lacked that. This earlier version lacked that entirely. So that was what I tried to breathe new life and freshness back into it.
Let's move on to the second lie, and I need to set this quote up just a little bit, because the first phrase is, but this architecture of no time. And what she's referring to here is that using Google Translate as the model, that you just plug in the phrase or you plug in the sentence and you get an instant translation, which of course then leads into AI. That's what she's referring to, I think, with architecture of no time. But this architecture of no time, a feature of our promised smooth and frictionless future, is built on a lie. A lie which we translators maintained because it kept us employed. But since that is threatened now, here it is, our trade secret. Just because translation happens all the time does not mean that it is possible. Translation is not proof of an equivalency between two words or sentences or texts. It is simply proof that a negotiation between two sides occurred. That is
Beautiful.
found.
Yeah, it's stunning. And she also, a bit earlier in the text, she says, I've spent my whole life living in the distance that this architecture asserts does not exist. The distance, the gap between two languages. And that's so true. The time, and this is actually something I'm thinking about for the first time, and it is really actually very profound. A translator, yes, it's far from instantaneous. You absorb a sentence, and then there is a period during which you're working on it in your mind, in yourself, and it's getting jumbled around and taken apart and put back together, and each word is being weighed in terms of emotional quality and accuracy, and then you produce this sentence, and then it comes out on the page, and obviously none of that can be seen. It's just there it is, it's on the page, and a person reading it may have no concept of the fact that you labored over a particular sentence, or even just let it mellow in your mind for a bit. Because I have had so many times when I've been translating and there'd be a phrase that I'm stuck on, and I'll literally just get up and walk away and maybe go make myself a cup of tea. And in the back of my mind, it's still working and all these processes are happening. And then all of a sudden, it's there. It's there. Something clicks and I sit back down and it flows out onto the keyboard and it's there. And it's a magical moment that I'm sure a lot of translators can identify with. But there's something very beautiful about that process of transmogrification, of transmutation. It's literary alchemy. And so for that to be dismissed and denied and replaced, but it's not even the replacement. It's the fact that so many people think that there is no difference between that immediate robotic, mechanical, cyber translation and this beautiful spiritual process that is the translation of a human mind. It's really kind of spine-chilling to think that anybody would consider those two things equivalent. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but I'm gonna think about it now, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was I just say just in a really profound moment in this article. And now I'm thinking it would be fun to interview her and feed one key paragraph of her article through AI or whatever into Chinese and have her pick apart why it's such a bad translation.
That's an amazing idea. Absolutely, it's an amazing idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even doing that with one of your translations, right? It would
Yeah.
be fun.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, this is her description of the third lie, which brings me
Mhm.
to the third lie, that work will be saved, that there is an easier way, a shortcut, that the time spent training for and learning the profession will be eradicated. This is a lie of omission, a lie of reclassification, of massaging the data. Any text which warrants nuance will still have human touch. But here's where that lie leads. Here's the danger. The person who touches the spat out text, the linguistic domestic who prunes it for the reader, will not necessarily have to be a translator, someone who is familiar with and trained in the original language. Will they? It's all already English after all. They will never have to see or know the original at all. They'll just neaten any verbal disagreements, prune any hanging participles, repoint all the idioms, etc., and then close the door and disappear. Like the story of the vacuum creating more work for the American housewife, not less, the translator will become less, be paid less, learn less, gain less satisfaction from their work. But they won't disappear. They'll just be demoted. Woof!
It's chilling. That is bleak. She doesn't end on this note, thankfully. There
Does
is more
not.
after this, but that is an incredibly bleak scenario. And I can certainly tell you that I have had esteemed colleagues, award-winning translators who've already been approached about post-editing AI translations. And to a person, they've said, absolutely not, never. And I would agree with that. The day that someone wants me to basically what she has to echo her kind of clean up after AI is the day that I leave literary translation. The day that that is the only work that exists for me, if that day ever arrives, will be the end of my career. And I will look back on it with love and fondness, and I will walk away knowing that I left behind an important body of work. But I will not look back, I can tell you that much.
You will not deign to become a linguistic domestic.
Exactly. I'm worth more than that, and I know countless literary translators who are worth infinitely more than that.
As a segue into talking more about the optimistic ending or the hopeful ending of this piece, I would like to proffer just a comment that I think really this is going to be up to the readers. It's going to be up to the audience, to the people that want to read shapely literary fiction, shapely literary translation. Are they going to accept? I know I couldn't accept it as a reader. I wouldn't buy a work of translated literature that was translated by AI. It would be an inferior product. It wouldn't be good. Even if they get it to the point where it could be good, just on principle, I wouldn't. But is
Yeah.
that a hopeful thing, or is that we thought Trump would lose the election, but people voted for him? So is it like that? Could it go either way?
So, so in a sense, I think it is like that, but maybe not in quite as grim a way as you might be meaning. I think just as there are different types of people, there are the type who are thinkers and seek knowledge and vote for peace and with optimism and love in their hearts for the rest of humanity. There will also be people who are lazy, less intelligent, less intellectual. There are those people with or without AI, and there are people who prefer to read. I wouldn't want to point a finger at any group in particular because I actually think any reading is good. I love when anybody reads. Whatever they read, I just am pleased when people read. But there are certainly people whose taste runs to quickly written, hastily edited kind of trash. Plenty, there are plenty. And maybe those people aren't going to be the type who would pick up a book in translation anyway. I tend to think that readers of literature and translation are an educated and discerning and intellectual and highly emotionally evolved kind of breed. And so, on principle, they're probably not going to want to reach for some AI trash either. This may just lead to a further stratification, let's say, of the world's readers. That is another possibility. And in that case, we coexist, as I suppose we've always done, and we have the AI trash on one hand and the properly done, creatively crafted literary translations that are going to be read by the people who always would have read them on the other hand.
Do you want to say anything more about the way that it ends?
I think what I just said is probably a
A good-
decent note to end on, actually. We could have just sat here together and read the whole thing. and not even added any of our own comments, and it would have been lovely.
Which is another way of saying what I want to say now, which is that really people go read the article. There's more than we had time to touch on. There's a lot more for you to discover. But I'd like to now, can't you segue twice in one conversation? I'd now like to transition into hearing more about, Tina, what you're working on. And then at the end, I'll ask you about what you're reading for Women in Translation Month, which I should have said that that's why we're the topic of literary translation is not a gendered thing, but this is going up in Women in Translation Month. So we'll get to what you're reading for that and so on in a few minutes. Let's start with, tell us about this forthcoming book by Marc Levy that you have translated that will be published in January.
I'm really excited about this one. So this is going to be coming out from Harper Via in January of next year, as you said. And a lot of you might be familiar with Marc Levy already. He is the world's most read French author. His books in translation have been made into films. You can find one probably just about anywhere, any size bookshop, you'll find at least one Marc Levy.
Wow.
And this particular one, the book is called Symphony of Monsters. It is a fast-paced thriller, a crime novel, a bit of a spy novel, but really what it's about are the Ukrainian child kidnappings. Marc Levy himself is the son of Ukrainian immigrants who settled in Paris.
Okay.
And he has said that for many years, people, in speaking of the Holocaust, said that the reason that it was allowed to happen was that they didn't know. And with the Ukrainian child kidnappings, Marc decided to write this book so that no one would be able to say, I didn't know. And this book lays it all out. And it can be very difficult to read when you know that it's based on something that has happened and continues to happen every day currently in Ukraine. That said, it's a really fun, exciting read. This is no grim thing that's going to leave you feeling hopeless about the state of the world. Marc Levy writes with love and optimism, and it's a thrill ride of a book, really worth it. So
Sounds amazing. I didn't know anything about Marc Levy, and he sounds fascinating. And I think you have another one. I'm not sure if it's been translated yet, but you're going to be translating by him.
So I have translated it already.
Okay.
It'll be out in November of next year, I believe. It's being published by a new independent publisher called Firefinch. So you can find them on Instagram. I believe they're on BlueSky as well. They're an exciting new independent publisher. The Bookshop of Forbidden Books is the title, and very topical. Again, a thriller and a mystery and an exciting novel, but grounded in reality about some of the American states, mainly, or I should say, initially, the first one was Florida, which passed a law with a list of books that it was banning, making it illegal to lend or teach those books or possess them in school libraries. And this book focuses on that law and on book banning and on the injustice of it and what people are doing to rise up and fight against it. Look for that one in roughly a year and a half.
Year and a half. He has quite a diverse range of things that he writes his books about.
He does. He does.
And is there anything else you're working on now, translation-wise, that you'd like to tell us about?
Yes, I am at the moment working on a book by Alexandra Lapierre, who you might be familiar with because she also wrote the book Belle, Greene, which I translated into English, which was about J.P. Morgan's personal librarian, who basically built the Morgan Library from scratch, and who also happened to be a mixed race woman passing as white in early 20th century America. So an incredible woman. And Alexandra Lapierre specializes in shining a spotlight on these forgotten women who played such an important role in history. And in this particular case, the book is about Miles Franklin, and that was the pen name of Stella Miles Franklin, who was and still remains very well known in Australia, but she was a novelist, but also a suffragette, tireless campaigner for women's rights, and just a woman far ahead of her time. So this is a novel of her life. This is her life story in novel form. And that will be out, I would imagine, sometime in 2026 from Europa Editions.
You're going to have a busy year of book launches next year.
Yes, let's hope so. I hope so. They're all very exciting. Good, some
Now,
good stuff.
Absolutely.
There is a big literary prize named after her in Australia. I think any Australian would recognize the name, but I had never heard of her. So,
I have read her most famous novel and quite enjoyed it.
My Brilliant Career.
Brilliant career. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, so far ahead of its time.
Yeah. And when I talk about the Stella Prize with any of my Aussie bookish friends online, especially when I use Voxer or something that has voicemail, I'll say, Stella, Stella. We are at the beginning of this will go up hopefully the first week of Women in Translation Month. Are you reading anything special for the occasion, Tina?
Yes, I am at the moment. And this will be the first of many, I'm sure, this month. But the one I'm reading at the moment is a book called Nightingale and Company by Charlotte Printz. This is translated by Marina Sofia. From the German, it's out from Corylus Books. And it is basically about a pair of sisters running a detective agency in 1961 Berlin. So very exciting. It's a really fun series. This is just the first one in the series. I'm hoping they're all going to be translated because it's absolutely delightful. So, highly recommended.
That's great. I've always been curious, why do we say translated from the German rather than translated from German? Is it just
I know.
the
I
German
don't know.
make it shorter, that the German language becomes the German?
I have a feeling it's just a little bit of an affectation, like a leftover affectation from like decades ago, and I don't know why. I don't even say it intentionally. It's just automatic. But I know it actually annoys some people. They just think it's ridiculous. Why say the Italian? It's Italian. So that's a question that actually comes up.
Okay, well, I don't feel stupid asking it then.
No, a lot of people have asked that. Yeah.
I think it sounds wrong to say translated from German. Oh, it's translated from the German.
Yeah, it's just a funny little
I've
quirk
never
of the
heard of
English language, isn't it?
Interesting. Do they have a similar thing in French? Would they
Well, in
say
French, you always put the article before the noun of the language. So maybe it stems from that somewhere.
interesting? Speaking of interesting, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Tina. Thanks for sharing your insights and concerns with us about the state of literary translation today with the looming threat of AI.
It's my pleasure. And I really would encourage everybody watching this, run to the link, which I'm sure you will put below the video. Run to the link and read the whole article because it's absolutely amazing.
And then after that, go to Goodreads or wherever and look up Tina Kover and all her fabulous translations. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you.